Alright, so here is my tier list for all 51 aspects in the game. I've seen a lot of tier lists going around lately. Shout out to the Aegis Relic, does some pretty epic tier lists in almost a podcast style format, which I've been thoroughly enjoying. And I don't tend on copying any of that content or giving my take on ranking weapons and damage rotations and exotics and stuff like that. But what I am interested in doing, if I was to do a tier list, would be to do something that is more oriented to build crafting specifically. And I've kind of wanted to do a tier list for a while. I just haven't been sure what I want to do that would actually be useful to you guys and fun for me to make. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going over all 51 aspects, and keep in mind, I'm coming at this from the perspective, from the subjective experience, and how I play Destiny 2 and make content is that I do a lot of build crafting videos, and I do a lot of solo flawless runs for either nightfalls, weekly campaign missions, master difficulty content. I do grandmaster content, not solo, but I do grandmasters frequently. I've gilded my conqueror now six times, and I just recently got my sword bearer title for Crota's End, or a couple weeks ago. I put together mission specific builds on all 3 classes for every single master raid challenge for Crota's End. And I have a couple series on my channel, a couple different playlists. One is called Legendary Builds, and the other one is called Boss Builds. Since Lightfall released, these have been my 2 playlists that I've been gearing my content towards. So my Legendary Builds series was first season of Lightfall, mainly focused on doing Lightfall and Witch Queen solo flawless on legendary difficulty, using 16 different builds, right? Because there's 16 missions between the 2 on every single subclass in the game. So, I mean, there's 3 classes, 5 subclasses, so you've got 15 subclasses right there. So I did 15 unique builds covering all of the, all of the elements. So I've toyed around with these aspects a great deal in that series alone, and then I started working on my boss builds series, which I do tend to add more content to both of these playlists, probably after this tier list, because this might be the only one I do for some time. Maybe I'll think about doing a fragments tier list if this video does well, and if you guys really would like me to do that, then I may. But I have plans to start putting together some more boss builds videos and some just general legendary builds, because we've had a lot of aspects and exotics enter the game since I did that legendary build series. So I thought it would be useful to and fun to do some more stuff. So I'm not 100% sure on how I'm going to put out this content or when, but I have lots of ideas, so you can look forward to that. In the meantime, I thought it'd be fun to just go ahead and rank all these aspects, because nobody really talks about the aspects when we talk about tiers. We talk about the weapons, we talk about the exotics, but if you play all 3 classes, you have this huge toolbox of aspects to play with, and basically every single aspect is like an exotic. Exotic armors and even exotic weapons do very similar things that aspects do, right? So aspects are kind of like the exotics of fragments. I mean, they're similar to fragments, but they're like exotic fragments, really. And they're class specific, so they're not as universal. But so that's where I'm coming from with this tier list. And I have a lot of considerations when I'm putting this together. I'm not winging this unscripted right now. I've actually done quite a bit of thinking about this in the format of putting, having a spreadsheet and having a ranking system for the various factors that you consider when utilizing aspects. So just quickly, what those things were. You've got evasion and movement. So I'm categorizing those two together. You've got survivability from healing and damage resistance. You've got crowd control. You've got is an aspect build defining or not. So for example, Banner of War, which I'll get to shortly here. It is build defining, right? It is Banner Titan. It doesn't matter what exotic you're using. Even without Syntheseps, Banner of War Titan is Banner Titan. And it is just an incredibly potent subclass to build into, almost regardless of any aspect or any exotics that you use, right? So that would be an example of an aspect that is build defining. Unlike something like, what could we say is not really build defining, like Howl of the Storm for Stasis Titan, right? It's not like, we need a Howl Titan, because that slide to activate the melee to produce crystal shards is build defining. It's really not, because we have access to glacial grenades, diamond lances, weapons that make crystals. Like, there's nothing build defining about Howl of the Storm. But Banner of War is so unique and so potent that it is build defining. And so because of that, I actually weigh whether a aspect is build defining or not greater than most of the other factors. Then there's also the factor of team support, right? Can an aspect provide put debuffs on enemies, and can it provide buffs to your allies? So that would be team support. Then we've got offensive power, right? Not talking defensive power, because that kind of falls into crowd control, and even survivability and evasion and all that kind of stuff. So but offensive power is just kind of like raw damage output, like controlled demolition on volatile Titan would be an example of an aspect that outputs a lot of offensive power compared to other aspects, right? So let's kick it off here. I'm going to go in alphabetical order, regardless of class, so just follow along here. We're starting with Arc Soul, which is a Stormcaller, Arc Warlock aspect. This aspect has had a lot of buffs over the last few seasons, actually since I think it came out with Season of Plunder. And then in Season 19, or when Lightfall released, Arc Soul got like a 50% damage buff. So it started off kind of mediocre, but it's really at a stage now where Arc Soul is it is a very good aspect. And whenever I'm on Stormcaller, Arc Soul is not coming off, because it has it offers a lot of team support, right? Because you can essentially give an Arc Soul to everybody on your team. So if you're in a 6-man activity like a raid, think of something like the Abyss encounter in Crota's End. At every lantern, you could put down a rift, or frequently you can put down rifts, and everybody has to pass through that rift. So you're inadvertently, giving everybody an offensive tool to take care of all the things that are attacking them. And so our Arc Soul is just, it's a very useful tool to have, so that you can focus your attention on a certain objective or a certain enemy, and have your Arc Soul, at your back. Your Arc Soul's got your back. And a good example of that would be like the moths in a lot of Hive activity since Witch Queen came out. The little moths that come off the enemies and can one-shot you in Grandmaster activities. Think of Ghosts of the Deep in the Samuma encounter with all the moths. I did my first solo flawless clear on Ghosts of the Deep with Stormcaller, and Arc Soul is just kind of like it automatically deletes moths. And a lot of the times you don't know if a moth hits you, you don't know what hits you until you're dead, but the Arc Soul is almost going to guarantee that that's not going to happen, right? So it doesn't check a lot of boxes in as far as other considerations for aspects, but it does offer a lot of team support, and it boosts your damage as well, right? Like you're doing more damage because of Arc Souls. It encourages you to play safe in a rift, so inadvertently kind of lets you play in a survivable type of way. And yeah, so, and by the way, if you're amplified as well, then your Arc Soul does a lot more damage. But regardless, I'm going to put Arc Soul in the A tier. And the way that I'm ranking them, I already know where everything's going because, like I said, I already kind of did my research and thought this out. I took my point system, which is, I'm trying to make an objective format of ranking these aspects. But obviously it's still subjective. Like I'm coming up with the categories, for these aspects, and then I'm assigning a certain rank to it. So there's a lot of subjectivity that within this kind of like objective scoring system that I'm doing. And then regardless of that, I'm still going to rank the aspect. Like, so even if the aspect gets a lot of points, on paper, like ticks a lot of boxes off, I might not like the aspect. I might not use it. So because of that, I'm not going to rank it. I'm not going to put it in S tier just because it checks all the boxes and because it's a favorite of everybody else. If I think it's in the B tier, then that's where I'm going to put it. But the scoring system is going to put it at the top of B tier, right? So the order of the aspects in the tiers relates to the scoring system that I came up with, and the overall tier that it's in is my subjective take on it. So yeah. So Banner of War. Banner of War, like I said, is build defining, so that is already getting a lot of points in my book. It offers obviously survivability with those healing pulses, not just for you but for your teammates as well. It is the only aspect in the game that boosts sword damage. It also boosts all melee damage and glaive damage. And if any of you have been paying attention to content on YouTube or even Twitch, everything is being done with Banner Titan. Even the Hunter mains and the Warlock mains out there, I see them playing Titan mains, or I see them playing Banner Titan pretty much exclusively when they're trying to accomplish anything as far as like speed runs, or just general gameplay. People are having a lot of fun with it. So it's going to be no surprise here that Banner of War is going in the S tier. It's also easy to proc, right? Easy to start up the loop. All you have to do is get a melee kill, and then you don't even have to get melee kills or sword kills to refresh the timer. You can just get weapon kills, and then you can amplify the amount of healing pulses up to Banner of War times 4. Just by getting weapon kills, which is, yeah. So don't be surprised if this gets nerfed, but this is definitely going in the S tier. And I think it also had the highest overall score for all my categories. So yeah, no surprise there. Next aspect is Bastion. So Bastion is, we only have 3 aspects on Void Titan. Right now, Void Titan is a little overshadowed by Strand Titan. With Woven Mail and Banner of War, Bastion looks pretty, I don't want to say pathetic, but just getting a overshield from placing a barricade, it kind of pales in comparison to Banner of War and into the Fray and all that kind of stuff. But regardless, like I've always enjoyed Bastion on Void Titan. It is an easy way to give overshields to yourself and to your teammates, and get offensive bulwark going. So it kind of like works in tandem with the more powerful aspect, offensive bulwark. But really, at the end of the day, this is just a class ability enhancer style of aspect. And there's a lot of aspects in the game that enhance certain abilities, like your class ability. So a lot of those class ability enhancer aspects are not going to score very high on this tier list because they're just giving a little bonus to your class ability. And sometimes it's not even a good bonus. Like sometimes it's not worth it to use it because it may affect the cooldown of your class ability or may replace your class ability entirely. For example, Ensnaring Slam replaces your Marksman's dodge and your Gambler's dodge. Right? So sometimes it's contradictory like that. But overall, Bastion is pretty good, for survivability, for healing. You can heal while you have an overshield. But the damage resistance from the overshield is good. And it's 50% DR, so it's close to Woven Mail, I think. And it gives you that extra HP bar. So where did I rank it? Bastion. Yeah, I think I just put this in the B tier. Overall, for a class ability enhancer aspect, it is pretty good. And I've used it in many builds that you can see on my channel. So yeah, I'm just going to place it in the B tier. It is just kind of average. Next on the list here, and I forgot here to be scrolling through these aspects as I go from aspect to aspect in case you didn't know what the aspect did, or if you want to read it, or in case I miss anything or can stand to be corrected, you can see it here in text as long as my head's not blocking it too much. But next up is Bleak Watcher. Bleak Watcher rated very highly in my scoring system and subjectively. I'm going to put Bleak Watcher in the S tier. And the reason for that is because it is build defining, right? So that already makes it makes it a very standout aspect, right? Stasis turret Warlock. If you're on Stasis Warlock, then you should be using Bleak Watcher, and that's what people would expect, right? It doesn't even matter if you don't have Osmiomancy gloves. Like, you can have Bleak Watcher turrets back to back, even without Osmiomancy gloves, and the turret itself is just so powerful. It lasts 30 seconds or so, and the slowing projectiles freeze targets very quickly. It is probably the best crowd control specific aspect in the game, or at least one of, in my opinion. And I use it on Master Bridge for Crotas, and anywhere that you need crowd control. Another encounter that comes to mind is the Glassway on Grandmaster in the boss room with 16 champions and you and your fire team, or even if you're solo. in those rooms. You can block off alleyways and corridors with a turret. Yeah, it's insanely good. Even though stasis is in a pretty bad spot right now, any little bump to stasis that comes next season, well, yeah, you're just gonna see more stasis turrets, and I see plenty of stasis turrets. Like every season, I run into other players in endgame content, and keep in mind, I'm usually on LFG, right? So this is another thing I left out of my where I'm coming from perspective of rating these aspects. If I'm not solo and I'm in a fire team, I am always in a LFG fire team, right? So just with random people, usually average gamers. So this, a lot of these aspects aren't necessarily like high skill gap aspects. They just work for the average player, which is, if it works for most players incredibly well, then it's going to rank highly for me, and maybe higher for me than it would for other players. Yeah. So next up is Chaos Accelerant. Chaos Accelerant is notably good for vortex grenades. It is a warlock aspect, right? So it allows you to charge up your vortex grenade, and it increases the size of the vortex grenade. That is the primary thing that it does. It does increase the linger duration. So I think a normal vortex grenade lasts about 3-4 seconds. You're going to get an extra second, maybe 2 seconds from Chaos Accelerant. So it doesn't really increase the duration that much compared to something like Echo of, is it Remnants? There's a fragment that extends the linger duration of vortex grenades, and that one increases the duration by 50%. So if you really want to make your vortex grenades last longer, you don't need Chaos Accelerant. You're mostly going to get that from the fragment on any class. But with Warlock specifically, Vortex are good with Chaos Accelerant because it just increases the size of the Vortex grenade. Like, it doubles the radius. So you're going to pull in way more enemies, which kind of gives it this crowd control type of benefit where you're you're sucking all those enemies into the grenade. And most likely you're using Echo of Undermining, so you're weakening them. Essentially, they're debuffed, and because they're being pulled in, they're disrupted from whatever they're doing. If they're trying to attack you, well, now they can't because they're basically trapped in there. So it's like an extremely powerful offensive tool to have. But at the same time, it's kind of like crowd control. But yeah, so I mean, it's extremely good on Voidwalker, especially with what's the one exotic Controverse holds. Because the one downside to Chaos Accelerant is the actual charging animation. Sometimes that dissuades me from using like grenade aspects where you have to sit there and charge it, because that's time that you could be taking damage from the enemy, or time that you're wasting that you could be shooting. Sometimes it's easier just to throw your grenade and forget about it. So you can kind of counter that with Controverse holds because you get damage resistance while you're charging the Vortex grenade. But regardless, just peek behind cover, charge up that nade, peek out of cover, throw it, and you'll be fine. And I would say the total offensive power of the Vortex grenade outweighs any downside to actually sitting there and charging the grenade. So I think that I ranked this quite highly. Yes, I put it in A tier. If this was a year ago when Void came out, Void 3.0 came out, or I guess almost 2 years ago now, this would have been S tier. But we have so many other options right now that are S tier that kind of Void isn't it's not really in the limelight like Strand is. So yeah, it's going into A tier. Now, did I have any other notes? Not really. But it did score quite highly. It scored higher than Arc Soul. So it's going to go in front of Arc Soul. Yeah. Next up, we have Child of the Old Gods, which is the other Voidwalker aspect. Recently, Child of the Old Gods has gotten a little bit of extra attention because of Briarbinds, the new Warlock exotic, which basically allows you to have infinite Void Souls, right? Child of the Old Gods is also known as Void Soul. It's the Void Soul aspect. The only way you can get a Void Soul is through this aspect. But yeah, it's especially potent with Briarbinds, and you can have like 2 or even more up at a time with Briarbinds. I think Child of the Old Gods really excels at solo gameplay, at single major debuffing majors and bosses. Any enemies that are tanky enough for you to send out your Void Soul to them, right? Because if it's a red bar, then by the time your Void Soul gets to them, like you shoot the red bar's dead. Now your Void Soul is traveling over to a dead enemy, so your Void Soul is useless. And it's not like your Void Soul always knows where it doesn't. I don't think it does go anywhere after that. It just kind of sits there and does nothing unless there's other enemies nearby for it to drain. So it could be a little bit frustrating using Child of the Old Gods, especially in a fire team, right? Because you're killing enemies so fast, your teammates are killing enemies, so your Void Soul is just it's not really being directed very well in a lot of content outside of solo gameplay, where you can direct your Void Soul strategically at certain enemies and benefit from it that way. The weakening debuff is very nice. It does give you melee energy. It gives you energy for your abilities as well, which I sometimes forget about. It is also good for a glaive build on Voidwalker. So if you're playing a glaive style where you're charging into enemies and dropping your rift down, maybe throwing a vortex grenade on yourself, so you can just you can sit in a rift, have all the enemies get sucked into your rift, and you've got a Void Soul draining them at the same time, and you can just glaive everything, right? So it is a useful aspect for any kind of glaive build in PVE. And I think I definitely did a solo run for my legendary build series where I did a glaive build with Child of the Old Gods, and I think it was Vexcalibur and Karnstein armlets. So yeah, Child of the Old Gods. I'm a little bit biased. I like it. I like it probably more than it is actually good. But I did place it where I didn't even place it that high. So it's in the C tier. It didn't get that many points on my ranking system, but it just doesn't really offer a lot as far as team support. There's way better options. Also, just in general, like I've weighed a lot of these aspects in comparison to the other aspects to choose from on that subclass. So Voidwalker has access to Chaos Accelerant and Feed the Void, and generally those two aspects are just going to be better. And you can get the same effects that you would want out of a Void Soul without a Void Soul, just from Echo of Undermining and various different weaken sources in the game. So yeah, so it does rank fairly low. Not as low as Consecration though, because Consecration is going in the D tier. There's Consecration. Don't even get me started. A lot of the melee based aspects are gonna go in the D tier, for the simple reason that I don't know why Bungie designed a lot of these melee aspects this way, but they designed them in a way where it completely overrides and replaces your melee ability, which to me it's not consistent with a lot of other aspects. Like Chaos Accelerant makes your grenades better. It doesn't get rid of your grenade and replace it with something else. Bastion doesn't get rid of your barricade, it just makes your barricade better. Consecration gets rid of your melee ability if you want to use it, right? Then you have to wait. It eats up the cooldown of your melee ability. So you don't get to use your throwing hammer or your hammer strike. Instead you use Consecration, which does basically the same thing as a hammer strike to a red bar. Like if you hammer strike an enemy and kill it, you're going to set off an ignition. If you want to get an ignition from Consecration, not only do you have to do this whole, like, you have to jump through, you have to leap, you have to jump through hoops to activate it. You have to slide, you have to sprint first, then you got to slide, and then you got to activate the thing, right? Which is more work than to just use a normal charged melee. But then to get an ignition with it, the target has to be scorched first, right? So yeah, there's more conditions to activating it. There's more conditions to getting the benefit from it. And then you have to wait for the cooldown to get your throwing hammer back, for example. And why would you ever want to use this when you have Roaring Flames and Soul Invictus, and a throwing hammer, and even hammer strike? Like, yeah, I don't often use hammer strike, but hammer strike is good. It's just throwing hammer is just part of the Sunbreaker meta, that it's never going to go away until there's a cooldown or some kind of penalty that makes Bonk Titan a little well, it changes the way that Bonk Titan is played, because it is played very kind of mindlessly. Like you don't have to ever consider a cooldown on your hammer. You can just throw it over and over and over again, unless you lose your hammer because of your own mistake, right? So yeah, it's just I'm trying to think of a way where Consecration would be useful, and the only thing that I can think of is if it was not an aspect, if it was just a melee, just make it a melee ability that you have to choose over hammer or hammer strike. And even then, I don't think anybody would choose it over throwing hammer. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of these aspects that override your melees, or the ones where you have to do specifically like a sprint to slide to activate. Not a fan. Don't know why they're designed that way. Next up, we have Controlled Demolition. Where did I put Controlled Demolition? I know I put it up highly. Right, this actually ranked very high. I think this was the second highest ranking aspect in my ranking system, because it ticks a lot of boxes. It has extreme offensive power. It is build defining. Like Volatile Titan is Controlled Demolition. Like there's no Volatile Titan build without Controlled Demolition. It's the volatile application from your grenades, from your shield throws, or even your shield bash, your super, right? So this makes your sentinel shield roaming super apply volatile to everything, and then not only that, but all of the volatile explosions heal you and your teammates. So this has, and it's within a huge radius. So like, I think if you're in the same room, like I'm just thinking like Percy's Inspire the Watcher, if you're in either one of those rooms and your teammate Like you have the wall in the middle between you and Percy's, right? But so if your teammate is in like one corner of the room and you're in the other corner and you defeat a volatile target, like your teammate all the way over there, like 30 feet away, is going to heal from controlled demolition. So it has a very wide radius on the healing effect, and it is a good amount of healing that you get back. So it's very good. So yeah, build defining, survivability, and offensive power alone, and it's essentially team support outside of the healing, in the sense of you're debuffing all the enemies for your teammates. All the targets that you make volatile, like, it's going to be that much easier for your teammates to kill them. And I think the volatile explosions, like, you might not have to be the activator of the volatile explosion in order for you to benefit from the healing from it. So where did I put it? I put Controlled Demolition in the A tier, and it is at the top of A tier. Next up we have Cryoclasm. So Cryoclasm's not bad if you're going to do a Shatter build on Stasis Titan, right? This is a Titan aspect. Cryoclasm is, I would say, it's a favorite aspect if you intend on playing very aggressively with Behemoth. Then I would probably use Cryoclasm, because just sliding into crystals and frozen targets shatters everything instantly, kind of like Shatterdive, but it is in the slide format. And it also gives you, essentially a boost to your movement and evasion, really, because you're like, that slide is an elongated, faster slide. So yeah, it's very fun. It's just, the problem is it's on a subclass that is kind of at the bottom of the barrel compared to other subclasses. Like, Behemoth is just doesn't really have a whole lot of desirability in the current sandbox, and definitely not an aggressive style Behemoth. Like, if I'm playing Behemoth in Endgame, which I have done this season, I think I farmed Scarlet Keep with Behemoth, and Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap with Wicked Implement. I did a few runs like that, but in GMs I play Behemoth Titan defensively. Like, I don't even use glacial grenades really for offensive power. I just use them as barricades. I just surround myself with crystals, and then I shoot off pieces of those crystals to proc Whisper of Shards and get stasis shards for overshield and healing from Whisper of Rhyme. So Cryoclasm doesn't come into play at all with the way that I play Behemoth in Endgame. Maybe in some dungeons and stuff, but really just all the other subclasses are just going to do you so much better. So fun to use, optimal to use in low-end content, and just for movement, but other than that, not really useful at all, unfortunately. But I didn't put it at the bottom. It's not in D tier, it's in C tier, but it did score quite low. So next up we have Diamond Lance. Diamond Lance has 3 fragment slots, which is another consideration that I didn't really talk about, but if an aspect has 3 fragment slots, that automatically bumps it up in viability, because the fragments are good, right? So if you can have 5 fragments on a subclass, sometimes that is more worth it than the actual utility of the aspect itself. Not that Diamond Lance isn't useful or not useful, I'm just speaking generally with 3 fragment slots. But Diamond Lance is... I actually rated this right underneath Cryoclasm. So, like I've just mentioned with Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap, you don't even need Diamond Lance. You don't even need the aspect. And the downside to Diamond Lance is to get those lances, you need to defeat targets with, like it says right here, stasis abilities or weapons. So what it means for you a lot of the time is that those lances are produced outside of your reach. So you have to go and put yourself at risk, and you have to be intentional about going to fetch those lances to use them. And then, I mean, it is nice, you can throw it at something and it freezes them. That's okay, but slamming them to the ground to shatter frozen targets, I don't know. It's kind of a fun little thing. It does have that team support aspect of it, where your teammates can grab them, and they certainly do, even when you don't want them to, kind of like Tangles. But if you want to use Diamond Lances effectively, I would just suggest using Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap, because you just get a Diamond Lance right there at your feet from shooting an enemy behind a barricade, and then the Diamond Lance that you do get does way more cool things than Diamond Lance the aspect, right? It makes that lance create a stasis crystal on impact, which allows you to break the crystal, proc Whisper of Shards for more grenade energy, get additional stasis shards for overshield and what have you, melee energy, elemental charge, stuff like that. So Diamond Lance has a lot of utility from just an exotic. But I mean, if you do combine Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap with this aspect, then all of your Diamond Lances will be better, right? But as a standalone, the aspect is not that good. It is just good because of the 3 fragment slots, really. But looking at my tier list now, I kind of want to put it ahead Cryoclasm, because I do feel like it's more useful in endgame activities, like just having those 3 fragment slots. Yeah, Cryoclasm is just really not endgame. So what do we have next? Drengr's Lash. So Drengr's Lash, like Bastion, is another class ability improver. I mean, it's a good aspect. It was especially good when it was the only aspect that we can use with Berserker, and the only exotic that we could use in combination with it was Abeyant Leaps. But since Suspend has been nerfed, and since there are more appealing ways to play Berserker now, with other exotics, well, Drengr's Lash it's not quite as good. And even before it got nerfed, I still wouldn't consider it like build defining or anything crazy. I mean, it gives you, it suspends enemies that are rushing you with a barricade. So I mean, there's nothing wrong about it. There's nothing bad about it. It's just really, it's not all that interesting. And don't get me wrong, like, it is endgame viable. I use it for Grandmasters. I still use Abeyant Leaps. So I love Drengr's Lash. But yeah, where did I place this? I put it in the B tier. And compared to Bastion, this was actually ahead of Bastion. So that's where that goes. Now, Electrostatic Mind. I'm putting Electrostatic Mind in the S tier. Straight up, not as high as Bleak Watcher or Banner of War, obviously, but Stormcaller has really been buffed a lot since Arc 3.0 with the Arc Souls and everything like that. But a lot of the exotics that we have, like Fallen Sunstar, and some of the weapon reworks like Cold Heart, Ionic Traces are, I mean, okay, so Electrostatic Mind is build defining once again, right? You might forget the name of the aspect, but I mean, this aspect is what makes Stormcaller. It is Ionic Traces the build. Like, it produces the most Ionic Traces out of any build in the game. All you need to do to get an Ionic Trace is defeat targets with your abilities, defeat jolted or blinded targets, and then every single trace makes you amplified, which is going to boost your Arc Soul, which is going to boost your movement speed, your reload speed, all that kind of stuff. So you're just going to be pumping out traces left and right, and you don't even have to use fragments to supplement your traces, right? Because Spark of Ions only gives you one measly trace for defeating a jolted target, specifically every 10 or 12 seconds. Then you can get Ionic Traces from Spark of whichever one it is that gives you traces on arc weapon kills at random. You don't need to use any of those fragments because you're just, like I said, you're going to be pumping out traces all over the place, which is going to allow you to have like infinite uptime on your riffs, and your abilities depending on what exotic you're using. But I would say Electrostatic Mind is very build defining. It is endgame viable. And do the Ionic Traces go to your allies as well? I'm not 100% sure on that. I feel like they do. So I don't want to straight out say it has that team support aspect, but I think certainly from a solo perspective, solo endgame, like I said, I did my Ghosts of the Deep with Stormcaller, and having all those traces, having infinite rifts, infinite Arc Souls, infinite amplified Arc Souls, was all possible from Electrostatic Mind. Like, you don't, even if you're gonna use a sword on Ektar is one of the harder bosses. You can stand in a rift 100% of the time when you're doing damage to Ektar because of all the traces. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in the S tier, and I'm a big fan. That's all I'm gonna say. Next up, we've got Ensnaring Slam. So Ensnaring Slam, let's see where I put this. This is another class ability style of aspect, and I would say generally it's probably more appealing than Drengr's Lash for activating your class ability to get a suspension. Well, yes and no. Drengr's Lash, at least you can suspend targets at range. Ensnaring Slam forces you to get up close and personal with the enemies and do your dive, right? It does feel like a more instant way to suspend enemies, though. So I do enjoy the whole activation of Ensnaring Slam. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a movement tech where you can, not take fall damage, for example. You can dive off a cliff, and if you just dive, then you're not going to take any damage when you land, which is kind of fun. So it has a fun factor to it. And suspension suspend is good regardless of it being nerfed. The only thing that I don't like about Ensnaring Slam is that it forces you to give up Gambler's Dodge and Marksman's Dodge. I mean, it doesn't doesn't take it away, but if you decide to do a normal dodge, then you're not doing an Ensnaring Slam. So what's the point of having the aspect if you're going to use Gamblers or Marksman? So this is one of those unfortunate class ability aspects where it actually overwrites your class ability instead of just enhancing it. But regardless, it's still good. So I'm going to put it in the B tier next to Drengr's Lash. Next up, we've got Feed the Void. Feed the Void is... Let's see how I actually rated it. I think it rated pretty high. It is build defining. Yeah, it is build defining. I would say it's the most build defining aspect for Voidwalker, for sure. Even though you can get Devour from picking up Orbs of Power, from Echo of Starvation and Void Breaches. Feed the Void allows you to get Devour without having to go and pick anything up. You just kill anything with a Void ability. And if you're using Vortex Grenades and Chaos Accelerant, you're going to be getting a lot of ability kills. And you also get a longer duration of Devour with this aspect. So if you really wanted to play into Devour on Titan or Hunter or even Warlock without Feed the Void, you'd have to invest a lot into fragments. Like you'd have to take up half of your fragment slots basically to use Echo of Starvation and Echo of Persistence to get 8 seconds, maybe 10 of Devour. So, and you get some penalties, like it penalizes your stats quite heavily for using the fragments. So you could just negate having to use those fragments and use better fragments instead by using Feed the Void. And Devour is still extremely... Overall, I would say it is one of the best class buffs that you can get in the game, especially solo, right? Because this isn't the type of buff where you can pass it on to your teammates. It's just like, it's purely for you. You get kills, you get all your health back, you get grenade energy. I mean, it's just, it's invaluable, especially for solo play, like how I play the game most of the time. It's just unfortunate that in team play, you pretty much got to be on well, because if you're not, then you're just kind of a jerk. Not really, but I mean, yeah, if you're gonna do a raid, then bring a well to the table. Unless you're doing 6 warlocks, then it's like a treat if you can actually be on a different subclass. But I would definitely, if all I did was raid and play with teammates, I would find warlock one of the most boring classes in the game, because yeah, you're just kind of like pigeonholed into using a Well of Radiance. But for solo play, Voidwalker is top tier for sure. So I put it in the A tier, and it scored, I can't remember where it scored, but I'm gonna mess with this. I'm gonna put it I don't know if it goes ahead of Controlled Demolition, but I feel like Feed the Void is almost S tier. So I'm going to put it in A, or I'm going to put it at top of A tier. Next up we have Flechette Storm. So again, like Consecration, this requires you to sprint in order to slide and then activate your charged melee. You want to give up 3 Frenzied Blades that will sever enemies, especially with the way that Frenzied Blade is right now. I don't think Flechette Storm is really worth it, especially because all it does, I mean, it is nice to have a ranged melee, but unraveling is not that good. I mean, it's alright, but it's not like volatile, right? It's just kind of like the cheap version of volatile. Yeah, so I'd rather have my Frenzied Blades, thank you, and I'd rather have Banner of War or Drengr's Lash or Into the Fray. In fact, I don't even think I've used Flechette Storm because I have no reason to. I've seen other people use it. I've seen it used in videos, and just nothing really appeals to me that much. So Flechette Storm is going in the D tier, and I think it even got lower than Consecration. Because I feel like Consecration, no, it scored a little bit higher than Consecration. Probably, I don't know why, but it doesn't matter. It's in the D tier for me. Flow State. Okay, so here we go. Finally, is this the first arc aspect? I think it is. But that's just how the alphabetical order kind of played out. But I will say Flow State scores very highly. Defeating jolted targets makes you amplified. So this is build defining as well, because for Arc Titan, I mean, there's two aspects that make Arc Titan what it is. And Arc Titan is punch dodge. And it's not punch dodge unless you have Flow State and Lethal Current. Mainly Lethal Current. I'll get to Lethal Current. But Flow State is a key ingredient to that, because it just, like it says right here, while you're amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly. You are more resilient while dodging. That is, to me, that's the main factor right there. And your reload speed is greatly increased. So I think amplified already gives you a boost to reload speed. But I think with Flow State, you have even more reload speed. But the resilience while dodging is really the key takeaway here, along with, just getting amplified for free, basically, because everything that you punch with Combination Blow and Lethal Current is going to be a jolt, which is going to make you amplified. So yeah, like you punch, you do a Gambler's Dodge to get your punch back. And you can just do that over and over again. So as long as you're always dodging, you're basically always have damage resistance. So it's what gives Arc Strider the survivability to play aggressively as a melee build in such a way. And it's so build defining that you don't need any exotic armor to really enhance this gameplay loop. So like frequently in raids, I'll run just run Star Eater scales, because you don't even need to swap. Like, you don't need to use Assassin's Cowl or any other exotic really for neutral gameplay. Like if you're gonna do swap loadouts in raids, like you swap your loadout to do damage to the boss. So if you do that, then you can use a different exotic when you're doing your neutral gameplay, setting up to damage phase for survivability, for ad clear, all that kind of stuff. But you just don't need to. And I'm speaking from endgame, like master difficulty content. Doesn't, like, I can run around with Star Eater scales. It doesn't matter what exotic you're using. If you're using Flow State and Lethal Current properly, and you're just playing into the Arc Strider gameplay loop, you're going to be extremely effective offensively, and then defensively with the survivability. It's incredible. But again, like I said, Lethal Current is kind of at, I mean, they're both key parts of that build definition, but yeah, Flow State is almost as highly ranked as Lethal Current, but not quite. But it is A tier for me, and I'm probably gonna put it ahead of. Yeah, I'm not sure what my ranking was. I might rearrange these in each tier at the end of the video. But for now, I'm just going to put it at the top of A tier because I think that's where it roughly is. So next up we have Frostpulse. Frostpulse, it enhances your class ability. It doesn't really replace it, unlike Ensnaring Slam. But unfortunately, Iceflare Bolts and Bleak Watcher are just way better on Stasis Turret or on Stasis Warlock. So I can't really think of an instance where I would want to use Frostpulse. Maybe if I was doing like a glaive build or something, or yeah, I'm not really sure, but I did put it in C tier, and I think I placed it a little bit higher than Cryoclasm. Yeah, so we'll just stick it over there. So next up we have Glacial Harvest. Glacial Harvest, this is so every Stasis subclass, Titan, Warlock, and Hunter all have a Stasis Shard aspect. And they all give you a different way to get Stasis Shards. On Warlock, you have to, well, actually, you just have to freeze targets, it says, and then it creates a Stasis Shard. But again, it suffers in the same way that Frostpulse does, where Bleak Watcher and Iceflare Bolts are just better. And Stasis Shards just aren't really that useful, especially on Warlock as far as like healing goes and Overshield, because you have a Rift. Right. On Titan and Hunter, there's a little bit more viability with Stasis Shards, especially Hunter, because the melee on Revenant is quite good. And not that Penumbral Blast is not bad. It's just you can just instantly freeze anything all the time with your turrets. Like, your Penumbral Blast isn't really adding or giving you anything extra for the build. So it's not like you need to play into shards for your melee. So because of that, I think I placed it in the D tier. Let me double check. Yeah, I put it at the bottom of D tier just because everything else is better. Stasis Shards are not that necessary on Warlock. Next up we have Grim Harvest for Revenant for Stasis Hunter. Defeating slowed or frozen targets gives you shards, so I guess it's a little more work than Glacial Harvest, but this is quite good because the Withering Blade that you have, you get 2 of them. So if you can get a lot of Stasis Shards, then you can have a lot of melees, and those melees are very good for stacking slow stacks and getting freezes on enemies. Dealing with enemies at range very quickly. So because of that, I'm just going to place Grim Harvest a little bit above, but it is still in the C tier. And I guess I would place it higher than Cryoclasm. Yeah, because it has more build crafting utility in Endgame than Cryoclasm does. And even Frostpulse probably for Revenant. Actually, even Diamond Lance. I'm going to put it above the other Stasis aspects in C tier. Next up, we have... here's an example where subjectivity... Wait a second. Something's out of order in my tier list. Gunpowder Gamble. Why was that all the way over there? No idea. Gunpowder Gamble. This is one of those aspects that I want to use all the time, but I never do. I have used it, and it's a lot of fun. Just the whole idea of having an improvised explosive to lob at an enemy for an instant ignition just like a throwable piece of dynamite, is super cool. I love that. Unfortunately, though, even though it now has 2 fragment slots instead of 1, it's on your mark and knock them down is just generally better. Gunpowder Gamble has that fun factor to it. It's just in endgame, it's not really as useful because keep in mind that this is actually an aspect that replaces your grenade. It doesn't enhance your grenade. It straight up replaces it. It might be a better grenade, but if you're using a healing grenade, what are you going to do when you have an explosive in your hands instead of a healing grenade? You need to use those two grenades for totally different things. So this makes it awkward, right? Because especially on Gunslinger, it is the least survivable solar subclass. So you kind of need a healing grenade most of the time, or you need to get healing from fire sprites or whatever, recuperation. But still, like, the healing grenade is probably most valuable on Gunslinger compared to the other subclasses. So I just feel like having that solar explosive replace your healing grenade, it just gets rid of your one means of surviving, right? And you only need to use a healing grenade when you need to use it. Like, you're about to die, you need to use a healing grenade. So now you're about to die, but instead you got a piece of dynamite in your hands, which can also kill you, or just finish the job off, right? So what happens if you throw your explosive down at your feet instead of your healing grenade because you weren't looking at the icon on your hotbar? So instead of healing yourself, you just blew yourself up. I don't know. So it just has this awkward aspect to it. So because of that, it's not going to rank as highly as my other Solar Gunslinger aspects. And it ranks, I think it ranked at the bottom of C tier, just up. The only thing saving it from D tier is the fantasy behind the whole throwable explosive. Super cool. Just really only useful in low end content, because in end game content, master stuff, dungeons, like on Gunslinger, you want that healing grenade. Yeah. Heat rises. So here's an example where subjectivity comes into play. I would rank heat rises. I'm gonna put it at the top of D tier, but I know that it is S tier for a lot of players. And I think as far as points go, like on paper, this ticks all the boxes, right? Because you get more melee energy. You can support your teammates by consuming your healing grenade, by getting more Phoenix Dives. It gives you evasion and movement capabilities. If you're using it with Icarus Dash, then you've got double dash. You can use heat rises to sword skate to places that other people can't get to. It amplifies the whole Sunbracer build. Allows you to get restoration ×2. Like, I could go on and on. It's just, I hate this aspect because I do not like feeling floaty. I can't get used to it. Keep in mind, I play all 3 classes a lot, but I mostly play Titan. And my next favorite jump is the Hunter jump. The Warlock jump is my least favorite. It's too slow. It's too floaty. I love it with Icarus Dash. So I'm not taking Icarus Dash off, and generally Touch of Flame is, more useful on pretty much every solar build for Warlock. But yeah, I do know that Heat Rises is some people are never taking this off. Some people love it. That's the only reason it's at the top of D tier, really. Because otherwise I'm never going to use it. It's not higher than D simply out of subjectivity. It's at the top of D because I know it is the best. Is one of the best aspects in the game. And I think as far as points go, it would be like third or fourth in line in S tier. But yeah, that's just where I fall on it, and this is my tier list, so it is what it is. Next up, we have Howl of the Storm. I don't know what got screwed up with my alphabetical order here. Like, why is Howl of the Storm all the way over there? Anyway, Howl of the Storm is one of the better stasis aspects in the game, specifically for Behemoth. I mean, it is a Titan aspect, but I mean, it is endgame viable. If you're going to use Behemoth in endgame activities, GMs, whatever, Shivering Strike is so useless for charged melee, and is the only charged melee for Stasis Titan, that Howl of the Storm is actually just better because Shivering Strike is so bad. I mean, Shivering Strike is a little bit better than what it used to be, not because it got buffed, but it's because all the other Shoulder Strike abilities got nerfed, like Seismic Strike and Shield Bash and Hammer Strike. Now all of those have a cooldown when you just use it for movement. Like, you used to be able to infinitely Shoulder Strike around all over the place. As long as you're not hitting anything with your charged melee, then you get an instant refund, right? It doesn't consume the energy. Now it consumes like 10% of your melee energy when you're using those Shoulder Strike abilities for movement. So now you have to wait like 10 seconds to use it again. So Shivering Strike is actually a little bit less bad in comparison to those guys, in comparison to the light subclass Shoulder Strike abilities. But it is still pretty bad because it consumes the entire melee. And I mean, the knockback effect is cool and all, but it's just kind of a janky charged melee. Like, if you try to use it to do like a specific jump to get from one place to another over a big open space, well, instead of like just going straight across, like, you just kind of like do this dive down, and like you might miss your target because it's just a weird Shoulder Strike ability that consumes all of your energy when you're just trying to use it for movement. It doesn't do movement very well, and then when you want to use it to do damage, it just knocks the target back. It doesn't even do that much damage to them. You're better off using pretty much any other charged melee in the game. So because of that, Howl of the Storm is actually not bad because it just eliminates that whole useless Shivering Strike. Instead, you slide to activate your melee, which you know how I feel about that already. I don't really like it, but for Howl of the Storm, it's useful because it gives you another wall of stasis crystals for you to break off and play into the whole Behemoth build, even in endgame, because if you can make a wall next to you, that's part of the way that you play Behemoth defensively, is you surround yourself with crystals for Whisper of Chains and damage resistance. You take pieces of those crystals off for shards for Whisper of Rhyme, and then you get more melee energy back from breaking those crystals from the shards. So it actually, Howl of the Storm is pretty good. It's pretty good on Behemoth. But Behemoth is not that great, unfortunately, so it's not going to rank super high. Howl of the Storm, I did put it in B tier, though, surprisingly. I think it's probably at the bottom of B tier. Yeah, so that's where that's going to go. Next up, Icarus Dash. Again, alphabetical order. It's a little bit off here. Icarus Dash doesn't check any of the boxes, really. Doesn't do team support, has no offensive power, doesn't really do anything. It gives you a dodge, an air dodge every 4 seconds, which is super fun. I love it, and it's going in A tier. where did it rank? As far as ranking goes, it's probably at the bottom. Like on paper, I know it's, it's not that great of an aspect as far as build crafting. It is just a feel good aspect. And it can save your life. I mean, it's endgame viable. If you get into a sticky situation and you need to get out, you can dash out. It also allows you to play into like Rain of Fire. Pretty sure that's the right exotic. Where you can reload your weapons, all of your weapons, with an Icarus Dash. So, I mean, it doesn't make Icarus Dash rank higher because, I mean, it requires an exotic to do so. But just generally speaking, as far as movement goes, Arc Warlock and Solar Warlock are my favorite subclasses because on Arc Warlock you've got Amplified, so at least you can move fast. And then on Solar Warlock you can air dodge, which makes it it's a little bit weird that it takes up an aspect, but yeah, it ranks highly for me. And I know a lot of people love Icarus Dash. Next up, we got Iceflare Bolts, which is, I think it's this one right here. Iceflare Bolts is not necessarily build defining, but it just enhances the whole Bleak Watcher build. Freezing stuff, it enhances your super. Anything that you freeze in the game, Iceflare Bolts is going to add basically stasis chain reaction to that freeze effect, right? Something freezes, it shatters, then that little trail of Iceflare Bolts is going to come off the shattered target and freeze something next to it. So you get this whole like chain reaction of freezing going on. So yeah, it's super good. If I'm running a Bleak Watcher build like Osmiomancy, I'm definitely using Iceflare Bolts. And I think it ranked pretty high just for the whole, like, it's top tier for crowd control, similarly to Bleak Watcher. It is somewhat build defining in combination with Bleak Watcher. It kind of just makes the whole Stasis Warlock build what it is. And it does it has offensive power because you're freezing so many targets, and it encourages you to shatter them to spread the freeze. Breaking shattering targets does do quite a lot of damage. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but it does a lot for ad clear anyways. And all that damage that you do ends up spreading more crowd control, so it's kind of doing both. Yeah. So it actually ranked very highly with points. How does it compare to Flow State? Yeah, it's actually on paper I ranked it higher than Flow State. So top of A tier. Next up, we've got Into the Fray. Into the Fray gives you Woven Mail. Woven Mail for you and your teammates. So this is every strand subclass has a tangle aspect that somehow enhances their tangles. And frankly, they're all really good in different ways. But Into the Fray is especially good because it gives I think it's the only tangle aspect that benefits your teammates, right? So you destroy a tangle, it has that like green blast radius around it for 5-6 seconds, something like that. Anybody that enters that radius will get Woven Mail, and then you can just go in and out. As long as you're in the radius, the timer is going to stay at 10 seconds of Woven Mail. As soon as you exit that radius, then your countdown from 10 begins. So if you just hang around in that radius, you have Woven Mail the entire time, and then when it expires, then you've still got 10 seconds lingering of Woven Mail for you and your allies. So incredibly good for endgame activity because Woven Mail is super high damage resistance. It plays into the whole Banner of War, Syntheseps, Titan build, like stacking Woven Mail constantly on top of the healing pulses from Banner of War. It makes Strand Titan like invincible in many situations where other subclasses cannot be. So I did rank it quite highly. It's in the A tier, not as high as Banner of War, but it is a very good Tangle style of aspect. I think I ranked it just below Flow State. Actually, I would probably rank it even below Feed the Void, because instant healing is just a little bit better than Woven Mail. Even though your Woven Mail can be given to your teammates, it's a toss-up, but I think it's right around there. Next up, we've got Juggernaut. Where did I place this in the D tier? Somewhere in the D tier. I've seen people use Juggernaut in raids and stuff like that, but I don't know why. I mean, yeah, and it used to be one fragment slot, which made it even worse, but I think it's primarily used in PvP. Because you get that frontal shield, which is alright, but I mean, compared to the other arc aspects for Titan, Juggernaut is just not it. Not for PvE, not for endgame PvE. I mean, it could be used extremely situationally, I suppose. But if you really wanted to have like an arc shield, why not just use... you can just use Risk Runner. Risk Runner basically gives you like a fully enveloping shield of arc damage resistance, whereas Juggernaut just gives you like a shield at the front, and it only works while you're sprinting. And so yeah, I don't like, it's like if you want to do like a suicide run on an Unstoppable, maybe in Seismic Strike the Unstop to blind them, to stun them, then I could see Juggernaut working. So it kind of encourages bad gameplay as far as PvE goes. While amplified, the shield blocks significantly more damage before breaking. Yeah, it's not worth it to me. I had something else to say about Juggernaut, but let me see, did I write anything? Oh yeah, so here's another thing. This is a basically a give up your class ability to use type of thing, right? Because when the shield breaks, which it should inevitably do if you're doing endgame PvE activities, then you lose your class ability. So then you got no barricade for backup, right? So then you're just completely vulnerable. You've just ran into a situation. You just ran at an Unstoppable and a pack of enemies, thinking that you're going to be, nifty and get a stun. But instead, the shield broke, and now you're a sitting duck, sprinting with no shield, and you don't have any barricade to put up as backup, and you don't have a thruster dodge to get out of the situation quickly. So you're just dead. So it actually just... it consumes your class ability in order to be useful. I like it. It just makes no sense for PvE. Like I said, maybe something super niche, like you're gonna 1v1 an Unstoppable with no other enemies around. But yeah, it's still gonna be super unlikely. Yeah, so I'm just gonna put it at the bottom of D tier for now, and it's staying in D tier. It's not going up from there. It might go up in ranking on D tier, but I doubt it. Knock 'em down. So knock 'em down is build defining for Gunslinger. If you're gonna be on Solar Hunter, then knock 'em down is like a must-have, because it increases your super damage. So if you're in endgame activities, like raids and dungeons, and you're using Blade Barrage or Golden Gun, then you best be using knock 'em down, because it's gonna buff those supers. Not only that, but it also is build defining for the neutral gameplay of Gunslinger, which is throw knife, get knife back for free on kills, right? As long as you have Radiant, right? So while you're Radiant, all of your knife kills are refunded. So you can play with it. You can kind of play like how you would with throwing hammer on Solar Titan. It's just there's a little bit more requirements. Like you have to get a kill. Like imagine if Sunbreaker, if Bonk Titan, you only got your hammer back if you killed the enemy. Like how that would actually be a dramatic change if they did that. You would actually have to be smart about what you throw your hammer at. But that's how you play on Gunslinger, and you could do it, and you could be extremely effective. So I mean, it just requires you to be a little bit smarter with your knife throws. Like obviously you want to have Ember of Torches so that your melee damage makes you Radiant, right? Because if you don't have that, then you're not getting your knives refunded without Radiant. You can use Acrobat's Dodge as well. But yeah, generally you want to use Gambler's Dodge just in case you do lose your knife, then you can get it back. But yeah, it just means you have to be a little bit smarter. You might have to weaken an enemy a little bit first and then throw your knife to get that refund. But if you do that and have infinite knife tricks, it's an incredibly powerful neutral gameplay build. And much like Flow State and Lethal Current on Punch Dodge Arc Titan, if you play it, it's a little bit more nuanced with Gunslinger, but you could do the same thing regardless of the exotic. I use Star Eater scales all the time in both the neutral parts of raid encounters on master difficulty and for boss damage. Even if I'm swapping loadouts, I'm just going to leave Star Eater scales on regardless. Well, I mean, mainly so that I can get Feast of Light ×4 while I'm doing my setup. But just because, like, if you play the build correctly with Knock 'em Down, then you have that survivability, right? Just have those throwing knives make fire sprites on kills, and then have those fire sprites give you restoration, then have a healing grenade just in case. Have Gambler's Dodge to get a knife back in case, etc. Just play it properly, and you'll be extremely viable. So Knock 'em Down is, where did I place it? It is towards the top of A tier. I haven't got to Lethal Current yet. But I would say it's higher than Flow State. Yeah, so I'll put it there. Knockout. So Knockout is kind of, Knockout is really your only tool for survivability on Arc Titan. A lot of the Arc subclasses suffer as far as healing goes. We don't really have any way to heal unless you're on Warlock with a Rift. Hunters have Flow State for resilience while dodging. They've got Lethal Current. I think with Combination Blow, you get chunks of healing on charged melee kills. Knockout kind of works the same, and it makes you amplified. So any melee kills that you get will proc Knockout, It'll make you amplified, and then any further kills will start health regeneration. It is slow though. It is not like instant health regen. It takes a little bit of time to kick in, so it's not really good. But it does also, it fills your uncharged melee with arc energy. So even if you use an uncharged melee with knockout procced, you will get arc kills. You will get kills that are credited for charged melee kills as an uncharged melee kill. So what this means is if you're using heavy-handed, which is a mod for your arms that gives you orbs of power on melee kills, on charged melee kills, well, it'll work with uncharged melee kills on Arc Titan with knockout, as long as you procced knockout appropriately. But yeah, so that is one neat benefit to knockout, is that it has that synergy with heavy-handed. And the arc affinity as well, right? So if you're getting any boosts to arc from like monochromatic maestro, then it would buff that knockout uncharged melee punch, essentially. But it's not like build defining or anything like that. It's your one means of healing on Arc Titan. It's an easy way to get amplified. Yeah, and those synergies like I talked about. So for me, it's just kind of B tier. I guess it would be in the same family as Bastion and Ensnaring Slam. I'll probably put it slightly higher than Bastion, but I'll rearrange these. I'll just reorder my rankings, my points, and see where it actually landed inside the B tier. But just looking at it off the top of my head, thinking out loud, I think it goes somewhere in between Ensnaring Slam and Bastion. So that should be a decent spot for it. What do we got next? Lethal Current. Lethal Current, so you've heard me mention this a few times already. That is because it is an S tier. I would say it's probably S tier and higher than Bleak Watcher. This is really the main aspect for Arcstrider that creates the whole punch dodge gameplay loop. Right, after dodging, your next melee attack has increased lunge range, so it makes your lunge range like Syntheseps. It jolts the target and creates a damaging aftershock. As if jolt wasn't like enough AoE damage, you also have an AoE aftershock. And then on top of that, you get this little bonus where if there's any targets that are left standing alive, which is usually unlikely, and they're jolted, they're just sitting there jolted, then you go and punch them again. Well, now they're blind too. So, pretty good for tankier targets, right? Because tankier targets are really going to be the only ones left standing after a Lethal Current combination blow. Combination blow is your charged melee attack, right? And so, it's just, which you can stack up to 3 times. So that combination blow melee ability does a lot of damage. But yeah, if anything is left standing, it's likely jolted. It's likely a tanky target like a champion or a yellow bar or something like that. Well, now it's just like completely neutralize them by giving them another punch, and now they're blind, and now you're safe, right? So all that is nice, but then you combine that with Gambler's Dodge, and now you can do it again. And with Flow State, you just get your dodges back from what does Flow State say again? I can't remember, but basically if you play it correctly, you're gonna get your dodges back almost as frequently as your melees. So it allows you to just stay in that gameplay loop of punch dodge, resilience while dodging, Enemies dying, enemies blinded. Before Banner of War Titan, like Lethal Current and Flow State, the two of them together were, I mean, that was it. That was the S tier build for aggressive melee style speed running stuff. Endgame, like just pure power. So yeah, definitely S tier. Next up, we've got Lightning Surge. So I believe I put this in the D tier. It's somewhere, it's got to be better than Juggernaut. It's got to be better than Glacial Harvest. It's got to be better than Consecration, even, because Arc and Flechette Storm, I would say, because it's another slide to sprint to activate whatever your melee, but this melee aspect does a lot more damage compared to some of the other ones, and that's looking at it like comparing it to the other melee options on Stormcaller, which are not amazing. Like Ball Lightning is okay for a ranged attack, but it doesn't like add any jolt or anything like that. It's just kind of like a generic arc lightning strike with Ball Lightning. Chain Lightning is good. It jolts targets, but you need to do it to enemies that it's like literally melee range. So Chain Lightning is often not that useful. So Lightning Surge is a pretty powerful way, and it's completely different. It allows you to, it gives you like a pretty good margin of distance with that blink, because essentially you blink forward and then you do this like jolt attack, and so jolt gives you ionic traces with Electrostatic Mind. So yeah, if you're going to be doing like maybe some solo gameplay or lower end gameplay where you don't need Arc Souls for you or your teammates, you could probably use Lightning Surge pretty effectively in Endgame. But I would use it as a replacement for Arc Souls, and definitely not Electrostatic Mind. But I'd say, just generally speaking, like Arc Soul is going to be the better choice. So I do feel a little bit bad about putting Lightning Surge in the D tier. Actually, yeah, I'm going to rank it up. I'm going to put it in the C tier, because if I'm looking at the C tier here, there's a lot of stasis aspects that I would never like. Lightning Surge sounds better and more fun than all of these. Maybe just behind Grim Harvest. Yeah, so I'll do that. I'll give that one the benefit of the doubt, even though I hardly ever used it. I think I may have used it once or twice. I've seen some people use it effectively, and it's fun to watch. It's good gameplay, and it's something different from Stormcaller. That's not like, it's not a complete loss, right? It's like, who cares? You're giving up Ball Lightning or Chain Lightning. It's not like Consecration where you're giving up Bonk Titan. Like, you're giving up a meta build for, a 2-minute cooldown for this weird melee. Yeah. Anyways, way better than that. So definitely deserves a little bit of credit there. Benefit of the doubt. Next up, we've got Mindspun Invocation. So I think Strand Warlock kind of suffers on a lot of fronts with its aspects. I've been a little bit vocal about that in the past. It doesn't really have anything going for it where it's like build defining. There's no like Strand Warlock the build. It's just like Strand Warlock the build is Needle Storm and Arcane Needle, and there's no fragments that really benefit any of that. And then like as far as the meta build for Broodweaver goes, like using Thread of Ascent for doing damage rotations and such, there's nothing for Broodweaver that enhances any of those cool things about it. So it's a little bit unfortunate. It does play into some niche builds though, so like Mindspun Invocation with Weaver's Trance. Weaver's Trance is generally a very good ad clear ability, especially like with necrotic grips, spreading poison, spreading suspension. Yeah, it's good. There's no doubt about it. Weaver's Trance is good. It's not S tier. It's just kind of it's an average. It's pretty average, but it is unique. It's cool. Like nothing else really does that. Like all of a sudden, kills just create suspending blasts. However, now you can also get the same benefit from the Wanderer. So I mean, you could just use the Tangle aspect, the Wanderer, and get the same benefit, right? So if you get a Tangle every 10-12 seconds, then you shoot the Tangle, you've created a suspending blast. Or you could just throw the Tangle and suspend stuff. So if you're going to use Weaver's Trance for suspending, and it's kind of awkward as well, right? Because to proc Weaver's Trance, you have to consume your Shackle Grenade. So it means you have to give up a Shackle Grenade to get, theoretically, more suspensions, but it requires kills now. So the thing is, like, if there's a champion, you want to throw your Shackle Grenade because you want to instantly suspend the most threatening target, which then means that Weaver's Trance is doing you nothing, right? If you make the bad decision of, instead of throwing your Shackle Grenade at the champion, you instead consume it, then you've got to shoot enemies, lower tier enemies, to kill them that are close to the champion to get the suspension. So it's like a big runaround to get what you really need out of it. So it's kind of just more for ad clear, which is weird as well, because if you're ad clearing, you don't really need crowd control. So it's kind of crowd control and ad clear mixed into one. But it's definitely very useful in certain situations, like necrotic grips with Osteostriga, or even Necrochasm, Le Monarch, stuff like that. For exotics that do like big AoE damage, like Weaver's Trance is gonna shine more. It's gonna shine more in the hands of good exotic weapons that do like a lot of splash damage and area of effect damage. So using your grapple with Mindspun Invocation is good if you're doing a threadling build. Your grapple melee you're basically combining a threadling grenade with a grapple melee, with a grapple grenade, with Mindspun Invocation. So it's pretty cool in the sense that you don't have to use a threadling grenade. But I mean, you do have to use your grapple melee in order to get, and I think you have to get a kill. No, it just says your grapple melee spawns 3 threadling eggs. So I think it's just on hit. So if you grapple melee and hit something, boom, you spawn 3 threadlings. So it is good. If you're doing a threadling build, yeah, Mindspun Invocation is good. However, the threadling grenade function of Mindspun is not very good. Consuming your threadling grenade is going to give you 5 perched threadlings. So you're just giving yourself 2 threadlings more than you would with a threadling grenade. But then they're just sitting by your side waiting for you to direct them. So it's not like instant use. It's more like of a roaming use. Like, you have this wall of threadlings around you that are willing to go out and kill whatever you shoot at. But the problem is, when they're perched, the problem is more with the perched threadling part of it, right? Perched threadlings aren't active threadlings until you direct them, basically. And if you want instant use out of your threadlings for offensive abilities, then you're just going to throw a threadling grenade where the enemies are, and then the threadling grenades are going to get to work quicker at killing the enemies. So yeah, I would never, if I'm going to have a threadling build, then I would much rather use the grapple instead of a Threadling Grenade with Mindspun Invocation. Otherwise, just use a Threadling Grenade and don't use Mindspun Invocation. Use other aspects. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand with that. It is cool all around. It is not build defining. It has some good functions, but yeah, so where did I put it actually? I think I just put it middle of the road, B tier, and fairly high. I would say it's higher than Ensnaring Slam and Drengr's Lash, just because it has a little bit more variety in its utility compared to just like, you know, putting a barricade down or doing an air dive or punching enemies, placing a barricade. You know, it's got some utility, and it's got some build crafting complexities to it. What else we got? Offensive Bulwark. Okay, so Offensive Bulwark is, well, it's kind of build defining as well. I don't know if it's on the level of Controlled Demolition, but I definitely prefer it over Controlled Demolition for Void Titan. It enhances your Ward of Dawn super, and most importantly, it gives you 400 or 500% grenade energy while you have an overshield, which is insane. That's like better than Devour. It's better than it's like Whisper of Shards kind of. Yeah, it gives you an insane amount of grenade energy. So as long as you have a way on Void Titan to get overshields, you know, either from Bastion or from Repulsor Brace or from there's some fragments now that can give you overshields. I mean, you do have your overshield while you're inside your bubble as well, so you'll get more grenade energy in your bubble. But yeah, if you play into Offensive Bulwark, it is definitely top tier for Void Titan. Where did I place that? I actually put this in the A tier, and it is where did I put it on A tier? I think it's got to go right around probably ahead of Flow State, just because of the grenade energy. I'm placing it higher than Controlled Demolition, which is possibly, you know, subjective, but and generally, if I'm going to use like Controlled Demolition, then I'm going to be using it with Offensive Bulwark, just so I can have more grenades to spread more volatile. But yeah, definitely build defining in its own right. Survive, it gives you you know, just the offensive power and the defensive power with Ward of Dawn. So next we've got On Your Mark. So here's another aspect that gives you 3 fragment slots, which is super useful. So especially when Gunpowder Gamble had 1 fragment slot and this has 3, like, why would you ever use Gunpowder over On Your Mark when you can have so many fragments? You can have 5 fragments while using On Your Mark, whereas before you were only able to have 3 fragments total if you're using this. Now you can get 4 instead of 3, but still, nonetheless, On Your Mark is a top tier aspect because it gives you the weapon feels like no other aspect. I mean, you can get similar from Amplified on any subclass. But On Your Mark, it gives you, yeah, what does it say here? I think it's solar weapon kills or precision final blows. Give you and nearby allies, increased handling and reload speed, which is, you know, if you're just running around ad clearing with like a SMG or whatever, it's just going to make you feel really good with your weapon in your hands. And to me, that's priceless. Like, I like the way the weapons feel when they're snappy, quick aim down sight speed, quick swap speed. and quick reload speed. Like, to me, that's a big buff. And you can get up to 3 stacks, so you can get a little bit. You can amplify the stat buffs that you're getting from it. And also, just dodging instantly gives you maximum stacks of on your mark, right? So I would suggest using it. It gives you, it buffs you and your teammates. Ultimately, in a damage situation, in a raid or a dungeon or a solo, you're going to do more DPS with on your mark because of that, because of that bump to reload speed and handling. Like, all of that plays into your damage rotations with your weapons, and it's gonna up your DPS. I mean, there are a lot of other ways to increase your DPS from handling and reload speed, but on your mark is just kind of a freebie, so you may as well use it. And because of that, I put it in the A tier next to Knock 'em Down. Yeah, somewhere around there. So next up, we've got Roaring Flames. Roaring Flames is incredibly strong on Bonk Titan. It is definitely build defining along with Soul Invictus. However, I'm not going to place it in the S tier. I'm going to put it in the A tier. Plain and simple. Where is Roaring Flames? Right here. Where I place it, however, I'm not too sure. Probably right around there. Yeah, you can stack Roaring Flames up to 3 times. It enhances your super, which, prior to Pyro Gales, Sunbreaker didn't really have like a damage super. It was more, it's a roaming super, whether you're using Burning Maul or your Hammer of Soul. Either way, neither of those supers are super useful for like boss damage in dungeons and raids, but Roaring Flames does make them do more damage. So I mean, that's good, and they are good supers. They're good roaming supers, like especially Hammer of Soul is a very good ranged roaming super. So having that damage amplified from Roaring Flames is good. And now it's even better because Pyro Gales allows you to get that one and done cast Burning Maul. So if you can somehow stack 3 stacks of Roaring Flames and get that Pyro Gale super off, then you're going to do, I think, the most super damage in the game. So Roaring Flames plays a part of that. Yeah, okay, I'm going to put it at the top of A tier. It's debatable if it should actually be S tier. Maybe it should. I don't know. But it doesn't check all the boxes, right? It really only checks the box of offensive power. It doesn't do anything for your teammates. It doesn't do anything for healing, for survivability. It just allows you to kill stuff very fast, and do more damage. That's basically all it does, right? So that's really the only thing holding it back, is it doesn't do anything else other than that. So yeah. Next up, Shatterdive. I know that some people use Shatterdive to shatter skate. I actually don't know how to skate. Or I think I do. I think I know the controls to do it. I've just never really tried. Because part of me is figured that well skating is an unintended movement tech, and whether you want to call that an exploit or not, I don't know. But I always have it in the back of my head that one day Bungie could just fix it and there'd be no more well skating or shatter skating, Because, I mean, there's no way. It's not an intended part of the game. If it was intended movement tech for the game, then your average gamers on console and whatever would be wall skating all over the place. But it is a very niche ability that a lot of people can only do it with like macros on a PC. So I'm not going to rank Shatterdive any higher simply because of that. Simply because some people in the community, or a lot of people, I don't know, can use it to skate. Just because I don't skating is not really in my it's not really in my scope for like build crafting or even gameplay. Like I never intend on skating, and I just don't care for it. But I understand that some people would probably rank this pretty high just because of that. Just because of they would classify this as a movement tech. Because of shatter skating. And it is still a movement tech even if you're not skating, because it gives you that dive ability like Phoenix Dive, like Ensnaring Slam, like Trapper's Ambush. Shatterdive allows you to do that dive movement, which means that you can take no fall damage by jumping off something and diving, which is cool. But other than that, all it does is shatter nearby targets. And you're not on Revenant, you're not really playing into a shatter build per se. You're more so, most likely on Revenant, you're playing into Touch of Winter, Duskfield grenades in endgame activity with like Renewal Grasps, or even without Renewal Grasps, slowing enemies and up to a freeze. But it's not like you're instant freezing like you are on Warlock. You're more so focused on slowing the enemies. So I think Shatterdive is probably less useful than, way less useful than Touch of Winter. Probably less useful than Grim Harvest, because Withering Blades are just better. And then what's the other aspect on Hunter? I can't remember, but we'll get to it. So Shatterdive for me ranks in the D tier, somewhere in the bottom next to Glacial Harvest. Yeah, I don't really know where. Somewhere around there. And yeah, I've said a lot of bad things about Consecration, but I value being able to like do a wave of solar damage for possible ignition higher than potentially doing a little bit of shatter damage, with a little bit of movement tech. I think as bad as Consecration is, I think it deserves to be in a higher spot, which is so unfortunate. What do we got next? Soul Invictus. So Soul Invictus is actually going to be S tier for me. Where in S tier? I'd say probably up there with. I'm tempted to put it above Lethal Current, but it doesn't offer the same offensive power as Lethal Current, so maybe I'll go a little less. And I do value healing a little bit higher than Crowd Control, so I'll put it above Bleak Watcher, just off the top of my head. Soul Invictus is build defining for Bonk Titan. Even though Roaring Flames is just as key to Bonk Titan, Soul Invictus is also, because it's what gives Bonk Titan the survivability to actually play up close and hit stuff with your hammer. because all those targets are going to create sunspots. That's going to give you restoration. Those sunspots are going to scorch targets and deal damage, set off ignitions every now and then, and it also increases your supers, or enhances your supers, because it creates a sunspot at your feet when you cast your super, which is going to extend the duration of the super. So it makes your roaming supers last longer. And then with Hammer of Sol, even more specifically, it creates sunspots on every single kill. And you can throw out like 10 plus hammers and easily get over 10 kills. So you can literally spread fire around the battlefield with Hammer of Sol and Soul Invictus, like in a similar way that you would with Sunbracers on Warlock. Which is kind of crazy that you don't even need an exotic to get that kind of effect, right? You are giving up. You're using a roaming super, which is not as good in a lot of cases for raids and dungeons, but for Grandmasters and solo flawless gameplay and other endgame activities, Hammer of Sol is like, with Soul Invictus, is incredible. And then just Soul Invictus in general for just for your neutral gameplay. It defines Bonk Titan in a way that makes Bonk Titan stay alive, right? A lot of people consider Bonk Titan to be one of the most invincible classes. It's not because of Roaring Flames, it's because of Soul Invictus. Every kill heals you and gives you restoration. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. I've talked at length about Soul Invictus in many of my build videos and gameplay videos. So for me, 100% S tier. So next up, we've got Stylish Executioner. Stylish Executioner is, you've probably seen me use it a lot with my Gerfalcon's Hunter build, but that's kind of where the buck stops on Night Stalker. Night Stalker is a great subclass, one of my favorite for endgame. But the reality is that Stylish Executioner is really only viable in endgame with Gerfalcon's Hauberk. So it requires an exotic basically to be good. And yeah, it has a great amount of synergy with that exotic and with Repulsor Brace, because Repulsor Brace has the same requirements as Stylish Executioner to proc. So when you're using the two together, it works very well, right? It's just the problem is it's kind of an awkward gameplay loop, right? Defeating weakened, suppressed, or volatile targets grants you invisibility and True Sight. True Sight is nice, especially like in the Glassway, in the boss room, being able to know where the Wyverns and the Minotaurs are coming from. True Sight is really good there, but mainly on Gerfalcons, you're using it just to flash in and out of invisibility to get more volatile rounds, right? Outside of that, I would never use Stylish Executioner over Trapper's Ambush or Vanishing Step. So yeah, it's just kind of weird that I don't know, it's a little bit awkward. And then the whole like weakening targets with your melee attack after being invisible, I guess it's kind of neat, but like you can just weaken targets with your Smoke Bomb or with Echo of Undermining, or other sources. So I don't know. It's not that great outside of Gerfalcons, and with Gerfalcons, it's very good. But that's just because Gerfalcons is very good. So yeah, where did I put Stylish Executioner? I put it in the C tier. 20 points though, so it scores quite highly. I'd put it up there with Child of the Old Gods. Somewhere around there. Next up, got Tectonic Harvest. So Tectonic Harvest, even though Behemoth as I've already mentioned, is not super good. Tectonic Harvest is kind of build defining for Behemoth. Shattering those stasis crystals to get stasis shards. I mean, that is the easiest way to get stasis shards in the game. So, I mean, it is kind of stasis shards, the build. That's what Tectonic Harvest is. It creates that whole Behemoth build where you just defend yourself with walls of crystals and slowly break those crystals to get shards. You benefit from the crystals with Whisper of Chains. You get the shards. You get with Whisper of Rhyme, you get healing and overshields. Yeah, and so you combine this with like Howl the Storm, so the shards can give you more melee energy, so you can make more crystals. Stasis shards, when you can make them right there at your feet without any requirements of killing enemies or freezing enemies, I mean, that's pretty invaluable. Like, if you're going to play into stasis shards, that's the way to do it. And you can get up to like 4 or 5 stasis shards just from breaking, a few crystals, which you can get a big overshield with Whisper of Rhyme that way. And also, like, if you're going to play into it with Elemental Charge, stacks on stacks, you're going to be topped up on Armor Charge all the time. Like, even before we had this whole Armor Charge system, this was the way to get max stacks of Charge with Light. It was the best class, the best subclass in the game for getting, like, maximum stacks of Charge with Light. And even Font of Might, when that was a thing, right? But now it's all kind of just combined into Armor Charge. So where did I rank Tectonic Harvest? So it's in the B tier, and that's simply because stasis is just not that great as it is. Aside from Warlock, I mean, it's definitely the best Behemoth aspect. So I don't know. I'd place it maybe above Mindspun Invocation, somewhere in there. Now we've got Tempest Strike. So this is, unfortunately, I think Tempest Strike is decent. But what's up with this 3-minute, 23-second cooldown for an ability that you never want to use? I guess if you're playing Arcstrider on a ranged build like Shinobu's Vow or maybe Mothkeeper's Wraps or some other, maybe Lucky Raspberry. If you're on some Arcstrider build where you don't intend on playing into the whole combination blow, punch dodge gameplay loop of Flow State and Lethal Current, then yeah, I guess maybe Tempest Strike would be okay, but it's still such a long cooldown, and it doesn't really do anything that combination blow does. It doesn't do anything that they don't do, right? The other aspects or the other melees, and it replaces those melees. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it just goes down here next to Juggernaut and Shatterdive. Again, because it's damage like Consecration, maybe a little bit higher up in there. But yeah, I've never used it. Never used Tempest Strike, because using that means that you're not going to play into the punch dodge gameplay loop. And I mean, that's what Arcstrider is. That's what it's best at. So what else we got? The Wanderer. So the Wanderer is pretty cool. It's one of those aspects where I feel like I like it more than it's probably worth. It makes your Tangle do a suspending burst. So it's kind of like having Weaver's Trance, right? Makes your Tangles better. If you're playing into Swarmers, then not only is your Tangle going to suspend targets, but it's also going to create threadlings. So like you can double down on your tangles with Broodweaver, with the Wanderer, and Swarmers. But it's not like build defining or anything like that. It does give you the opportunity to do some movement tech, because when you throw a tangle with the Wanderer, it kind of roams. It just goes, like, it doesn't have like a fall off where it just drops like a normal tangle. Like it launches in a straight line and seems to have like insane range, like and tracking. It just kind of just wanders around all over the place. So if you can throw a Wanderer tangle and grapple to it, you can go on a serious trip. Unlike you could on any other tangle. So it's pretty fun. Yeah. And again, I mean, suspending targets is an incredibly useful tool, even though it's been nerfed. So I'm putting it in the B tier, which is, I think, probably a little bit of subjectivity there, but something's out of whack here, because I got Touch of Thunder down here. Oh, because the Wanderer starts with T. I thought I was already on W. And this video is already going on 2 hours and 10 minutes, so I got to get through this. B tier, I'm going to put it... I think it's cooler than Drengr's Lash, and it's got... If you think about it, you can make more tangles. You can make like 3 tangles in the time that it takes you to get your class ability energy back. So, I mean... Yeah, I'm going to place it a little bit higher. Okay, so next up is Threaded Specter. To be honest, I haven't tested Threaded Specter for myself, but I've seen other people use it. And I feel like I could kind of rank it out on paper based on what it does and based on what I've seen it do, based on what I understand it does. So it gives you some evasion. You're playing into your dodge, so you got a lot of... you can play into Gambler's Dodge or Marksman's Dodge, unlike Ensnaring Slam. So it's kind of interesting that Threadrunner got 2 aspects that revolve around their class ability. But yeah, this one's... I think this would actually be very good in endgame activities. I've seen people use it in GMs. Like, I've done lots of LFG runs where people are using Threaded Specter, and it seems to save their life in some situations, and maybe mine, because if the enemies are shooting the decoy instead of me, then you're helping out your teammates. And then the decoy bursts into a bunch of threadlings that seek out targets. So, I mean, that's pretty good, and it's unique. It's extremely unique. So I'm going to place it a little bit higher because of that. But I don't think it's going to be... It's nothing like the evasion. I mean, it's designed as an evasive style of aspect, but it's nothing like going invisible on Night Stalker. So if you really want to play evasion, just play Night Stalker. But yeah, so I ranked this B tier, just to be fair. Like I said, I haven't tested it much myself, so maybe it should place a little bit higher. Maybe it should be a little bit less. But as far as I can see on paper, it's quite good. Nothing crazy. So yeah, I'll just play it safe and put it in the B tier. Probably... I don't know. Probably below Ensnaring Slam. Maybe above. I don't know. Somewhere in there. So, next up, Touch of Flame. Touch of Flame is going in the A tier. Simply because there's a lot of variety with Touch of Flame. And I've got to put it above Iceflare Bolts, because I do think that the value that you get out of Touch of Flame just outweighs Iceflare Bolts and crowd control. With solar grenades on Sunbracers, even with fusion grenades on Starfire Protocol, because Starfire Protocol is still useful as an add clear exotic, if you don't mind playing into Empowering Rifts. Yeah, so I mean, your fusion grenades basically do twice the damage. Your solar grenades with the lava blobs is just nuts. Like, people have soloed Riven, soloed Galron, just with tracked soloed Kali. I can think of Chablo. Been putting out those Kali farm videos with Touch of Flame solar grenades on Kali with the tractor cannon. Yeah, you can just take care of dungeon and raid bosses with simply Touch of Flame and Sunbracers. So that's kind of nuts. So Touch of Flame is definitely one of the highest ranking grenade style of aspects in the game. 100%. Yeah, it just makes your grenades better. And even healing grenades, like if you're playing into Ember of Benevolence just on more of a neutral support style Warlock build, your healing grenades are going to give you restoration times 2. I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, you can't beat that. And it also gives you more cure. So, yeah, enhancing those healing grenades is very nice. And I do so on quite a few of my builds that I use. So, like, if I'm not doing Sunbracers or Starfire, I haven't done Starfire in forever, but yeah, let's face it, if I'm doing damage with Dawnblade, it's solar grenades on Sunbracers. But if I'm not, I'll use healing grenades and Benevolence. Yeah, with Touch of Flame. So yeah, Touch of Flame. Now we've got Touch of Thunder, and then I'm a little bit subjective here again because I'm really a Titan main at heart, and if I'm doing damage, you know, if my focus is damage, offense instead of defense, then Touch of Thunder is probably like just my favorite aspect in the game, even more so than Banner of War. I've just always loved Arc Titan, Thunder Crash, everything about it. But Touch of Thunder enhances a variety of arc grenades. So I mean, this was infamous when Arc 3.0 came out. I mean, just take Banner of War out of this tier list here and put Touch of Thunder back in Season of Plunder and even Season of the Seraph. That's Touch of Thunder would be right in Banner of War's place because storm grenades on Arc Titan were just absolutely nuts. Like, you could literally just play behind cover and throw storm grenade after storm grenade, and they would do all the work for you. Like, people were soloing Grandmasters from cheese spots where you had no angles on enemies or bosses just by throwing storm grenades. They would just have insane tracking and roaming and duration. And so it was just completely nuts for a couple seasons. It was a lot of fun. And I didn't actually play into it a whole lot back then when storm grenades were the meta. Because pulse grenades were always super good, and they still are today. In fact, storm grenades have been nerfed into the ground, but pulse grenades were only buffed. And they were good at launch. Like IMO, they were just as good as storm grenades. They just required you to actually, you know, aim at an enemy and land your grenade. Unlike storm grenades. So, but if you did so, you would be heavily rewarded with ionic traces. And pulse grenades have a longer cooldown than storm grenades, but you get way more pulse grenades because it just gives you like 7 to 10 traces as it does damage. So you can use this for boss damage. Like even when I'm doing Crota, if I'm on Arc Titan, on Curus, like if I'm on T-Crash, it doesn't matter what exotic you use. With Touch of Thunder pulse grenades, you will have back-to-back pulse grenades if you use them correctly. If you use them on single priority targets that can withstand the damage from a pulse grenade, you will have back-to-back pulse grenades. Whether you're on Heart of Inmost Light, Curse of the Falling Star, Armamentarium, it doesn't matter what exotic you're using, you're going to have grenades every few seconds. And to me, that is build defining when you require nothing else but this aspect to do that. And the pulse grenades do a lot of damage, right? I mean, pulse grenades do the most damage out of any grenade, I believe, on arc across all classes. And to have them, to have those pulse grenades do more damage with Touch of Thunder, yeah, it's just nuts. So, yeah, like for example, when I'm damaging Crota with Curus and T-Crush and Bequest with Surrounded or whatever, I can throw anywhere from 3 to 4 pulse grenades in a single damage phase, maybe even 5. No joke. And I'm usually, doing anywhere from 7 to 8 million damage on Crota, depending on the fire team. And if everybody's doing the same thing as me, then obviously I'm not doing that extreme. But yeah, the pulse grenades add like a lot of extra damage, like a good 250,000 probably on Crota, without actually testing it for myself. I want to say at least a couple hundred extra thousand damage just from pulse grenades. So Touch of Thunder, yeah, it's going in the S tier for me. It's going in the S tier, but I can't really put it higher than Soul Invictus, even though I prefer this over Soul Invictus. Just Soul Invictus still has more endgame viability. Pulse grenades are raw damage output. I mean, that, like, you can look at flashbang grenades, right? So there's some crowd control utility there and stunning unstoppables with more blinding explosions, but you're never really going to want to use flashbangs in any endgame scenarios. You're going to want to be using pulse grenades. So Soul Invictus just ticks more boxes, basically. So I can't place Touch higher than Soul Invictus. Touch of Winter. So this is Hunter's variant of grenade enhancing aspect, where it actually does enhance all of the grenades, but Dusk Fields are the most notable because of the available exotics like renewable grasps, and because of playing into slow with like Withering Blade, and then even the dodge. I think it's Winter's Guile, dodge to slow enemies. Like, you have a lot of slowing capabilities with Revenant. Like even Silence and Squall is a slowing super. So yeah, just generally speaking, playing into the whole slowing verb of Stasis is kind of what Revenant does best, which is why you're usually 9 times out of 10 when you run across a Stasis Hunter, they're using Dusk Fields. And it creates that crystal in the middle. It increases the size of the slow field with Touch of Winter. So yeah, if I'm on Revenant, 100% I'm using Touch of Winter. Why wouldn't I? It's just that, again, unless you're on Bleak Watcher, Stasis subclasses kind of suffer in comparison to all of the other ones in the game. So because of that, it can't really place too highly. So it's just going to go in the B tier, one of the better Stasis fragments, or aspects, I should say. And I would say it's even got more utility than Tectonic Harvest. So I'm going to place it right there. Revenant is good. Like, Renewal Grasps, Revenant Hunter is definitely endgame viable. I've used it in GMs. I've used it in soloing boss fights. Yeah, it's viable crowd control. So yeah, and it's more team friendly than something like Behemoth, right? Because Behemoth revolves so much around producing stasis crystals, that oftentimes it's more like you just kind of look like a dick if you're putting crystals around everywhere, and then blocking your allies' line of sight, or blocking them from getting someplace. Like, a lot of people do not appreciate Behemoth in their fire team, right? But you can appreciate a Revenant, because those slowing dusk fields are useful to everybody. Not to mention, like, with renewable grasps, I think you get damage resistance while you're in the slowing field, for you and your allies. So yeah, not bad. Next up, we got Trapper's Ambush. So Trapper's Ambush is, for me, S tier. It ticks a lot of boxes. It does. Keep in mind that the Smoke Bomb got a buff, I want to say this season or last season. So the weakening duration from the Smoke Bomb is like increased by quite a lot. So you get a pretty viable debuff from using your Smoke Bomb, including from Trapper's Ambush. You can make you and your teammates invisible. I mean, that's the only aspect in the game that can do such a thing. It is the number one aspect in the game for evasion, and hence movement. You can move from point A to point B safely for you and your teammates. You can heal while you're invisible. You can get damage resistance, like from Omnioculus. If you're playing into invisibility, Trapper's Ambush is the aspect. It is build defining in that sense. I mean, what else can I say about it? It's S tier, I think, as far as points go. And again, this is actually a melee ability that doesn't ruin your melee ability. This is the only one, I think, this is the only melee style aspect that doesn't sacrifice your melee for a different style of melee. All this does is it just makes your Smoke Bomb 10 times better, because now your Smoke Bomb makes everybody invisible, and you can get longer invisibility from it by using the Dive Bomb, and you're still weakening enemies, right? So yeah, Grandmasters, maybe a little bit less viable in raids and dungeons. I can't think of any encounters where Night Stalker is necessary in raids or dungeons, really. But if you're soloing anything, if you're going to do solo flawless activity, soloing Grandmasters, soloing Master Nightfalls or weekly missions, anything like that, Trapper's Ambush is going to be, it's kind of like your first line of defense. A lot of the times, if you're going into an activity where you're blind to the enemies and the encounters, I mean, if you're a Hunter main, then you're probably just going to pick Night Stalker, right? And crutch on invisibility. Like if you're on Titan, you might go Solar and crutch on Soul Invictus and bonk. So yeah, Trapper's Ambush just has that defining feature to it with Night Stalker. So yeah, it's going in the S tier. I mean, if you want to Guild your Conqueror every season and just do it in a day, just go on Omnioculus, and any LFG fire team will gladly accept you into their team, and you're very likely to succeed in doing what you need to do. So because of that, I gotta place it. I guess fairly, it goes above Touch of Thunder. I think in my heart, Touch of Thunder is up here, but I'll try to be a little bit balanced here. I don't know. Anyways, regardless, it's S tier. So next up, we got Vanishing Step. So Vanishing Step, yeah, I mean, I just went on a rant about invisibility, or I just praised it. But Trapper's Ambush does more than Vanishing Step, right? Vanishing Step is easy, you dodge, you go invisible, but you're not making your teammates invisible. You're not playing into exotic builds like Omnioculus. So, I mean, yeah, it's just kind of it's the easier, freer way to go invis that just, it's more oriented to solo stuff, and it's only your dodge, right? But I mean, realistically, if you're playing Night Stalker on anything other than your Falcons, you're using Vanishing Step and Trapper's Ambush, and you're going to primarily use Trapper's Ambush because it is the longer, greater invisibility aspect that can also debuff enemies and has that team support. And then you're going to dodge just to get more melee energy from gamblers, right? So like your first line of defense is Trapper's Ambush, and Vanishing Step is just, okay, you're also going invis, but it's just because you need to do that gambler's dodge. So yeah, Vanishing Step is not going to be nearly as high as Trapper's Ambush. And to be clear, like, I primarily play on Drew Falcon's Hauberk on Night Stalker, so I'm not even using Trapper's Ambush most of the time. Most of the time I'm just using Vanishing Step and Stylish Executioner. But if I just, like I said, if I want to gild my Conqueror in a day, or join any LFG fire team, then I'm going to go on Omnioculus, and I'm going to go with Trapper's Ambush and Vanishing Step. But if I'm going to just do like solo offensive stuff where I just want to be aggressive, then Gerfalcon's Hauberk. So yeah, so Vanishing Step is A tier. I just can't place it higher. I can't place it higher than Trappers. There's no way. And even at that, it's going to go somewhere at the bottom of A tier. I guess below. Yeah, somewhere at the bottom of A tier. Almost done. Weaver's Call. So Weaver's Call is a class ability enhancer, like so many others. Very simple, and it just basically gives you a Threadling Grenade with your Rift. So I mean, can't beat it. Threadling Grenade only shoot out 3 Threadlings. With Weaver's Call, now your Rift casts 3 Threadlings as well. So I mean, it's quite good. I would say it's one of the better class ability enhancers, offensively. If you're playing into a Threadling build, then I would definitely most likely use Weaver's Call. Also, if you're in a bad situation where you need to place down a Rift to heal yourself, sometimes the Rift isn't enough to save you, but if you're using Weaver's Call, those Threadlings are going to instantly eliminate all those enemies that are mobbing you. If they're right up on you, then those Threadlings are just going to do work instantly. Like, they will instantly kill those things. So it's quite good for that. And because of that, I'm going to put Weaver's Call. I put it in the C tier, but I don't feel like that's really all that fair. I don't know why I put it in the C tier. I think it's better than Child of the Old Gods, because I think having that immediate offensive power from the Threadlings on Broodweaver is more useful than, debuffing certain enemies. So yeah, I guess I'll put it at the bottom of B tier. No, I think it goes higher than Howl of the Storm. So I'll put it right there. Weavewalk. Okay, so I was Weavewalk is the only aspect in the game that allows you to have one fragment only, and albeit it is a new aspect, and Bungie has stated that they don't want Weavewalk to be crazy, and I understand it could be oppressive in like PvP, so I guess PvE has to suffer because of that, But I mean, going invisible on Warlock is cool, but it's not like going invisible on Hunter, or even from going invisible on Void with the finisher that makes you invis on any subclass. This is just unfortunate. Like, you're gonna, on Broodweaver, which is already one of the weaker Strand subclasses, and the only thing that it has going for it is its Arcane Needle, and its Needle Storm super. I mean, it consumes your melee energy, and it consumes your class ability energy, or your class as well, because essentially, I mean, to stay invis, it consumes your Arcane Needles, right? So if you're going to be on Broodweaver with Weavewalk, okay, you're just throwing Arcane Needle out the window. You just forget about it. So you've already lost one of the most powerful abilities that you have on Broodweaver for, offensive, in just general gameplay, so that you can go invisible and do nothing. Like, yeah, okay, you can survive because you got some insane damage resistance and you're invisible. And yes, you're gonna generate threadlings that are gonna go out and do damage. But supposedly that doesn't even really work all that effectively. So, and you can't get out of your Weavewalk until you cast your Rift. So you're forced to use your Rift in a situation where you might not want to use your Rift. So this is like an aspect that I've complained about, where it overrides a certain ability, like usually your melee, but this one overrides your melee and your Rift. So, I mean, I can understand where it's got some extreme survivability, but everything else about it is just really badly designed, and it penalizes any type of build crafting that you want to do with that measly one fragment slot. So, yeah, I don't know. It's going to go somewhere in here with Juggernaut and Shatterdive. I guess it's got a little bit more utility than Stasis Shards. So I'll put it there. Next up, we've got Whirling Maelstrom. Whirling Maelstrom is extremely good. It's kind of like those Touch of Thunder storm grenades that I was talking about. Not pre-nerfed storm grenades. It's not that crazy. But I wouldn't be surprised if they got a nerf, because in endgame content, Whirling Maelstrom is debuffing targets. It generates more tangles, right? It is a tangle aspect, so you shoot your tangle, it turns into a Beyblade. It aggressively tracks enemies and kills them, like it kills red bars very fast, and it debuffs, unravels big targets, and it chunks at big targets too. I did a boss build video using Whirling Maelstrom on the Seraph Shield legendary boss. Yeah, it's very good. You can produce one of these every 10-12 seconds, because it's going around unraveling everything. It's just going to automatically produce more tangles. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling ability, where it just keeps its own uptime going as long as there's enemies. So it is definitely, I would say, the most offensive aspect that Threadrunner has going for it, and one of the most offensive Strand aspects in the game, of all of them. So I actually put it in the A tier, and aside from Into the Fray, that's the only other A tier Strand aspect that I have up here, and I place it quite highly, actually. Yeah, I don't know. I got to put it towards the top of A tier. That's where that goes. So next up, we've got Widow's Silk. Widow's Silk, I mean, it just gives you 2 grenades. So this could be, well, it gives you a grapple hook. So it has some team support there as well. If you're using grapple grenades, you're going to make grappling hooks for your teammates, which is super cool, because then everybody gets to grapple for free. which is very good for traversal encounters for the Abyss and Crota's End. If you want to be a support for your Banner of War Titans that are doing grapple melees, that means that they don't have to use the Navigator to make a tangle point. You can just make it for them with your own grapple. And it makes it specifically good with grapple grenades on Hunter, because making your own grapple point means that your next grapple, your last grapple that you have left, means that you can use that grapple indefinitely to that grapple point, right? So you can technically grapple forever for free with Widow's Silk and grapple grenades. And just having 2 grenades is better than 1 on any grenade, really, like Armamentarium. But like I said, it's better than Armamentarium because it makes that grapple point. So it's not like if you're thinking that you can just do this on Titan with Armamentarium, you can't. You still need Navigator, because you're not going to make a grapple point with a grapple, even if you have 2 grapples. So yeah, that's what kind of puts it above there. But I don't think I place it as highly as Whirling Maelstrom. I just put this in the B tier. Where does it go in the B tier? Yeah, I'd say top of B tier. I am a fan of Sire Tarakni Threadrunner. Grappling for Woven Mail, so subjectively I think I'm just going to place it a little bit higher than something like Touch of Winter. Okay, and then the last aspect is Winter Shroud. So dodging slows nearby enemies. This is actually very good with Gambler's Dodge and the Shurikens, or the Withering Blades, whatever they're called, because Winter Shroud, when you dodge near enemies, does, I think, 50 slow stacks, right? So if you do 1 dodge and 1 melee, then you will freeze a target. And if targets are already slowed and you dodge, then you might just freeze them outright. So it's a lot of slow stacks for doing a single dodge, and that can actually save you a lot of times. Like, I've used this in endgame content a lot, like on GMs. If I get rushed by enemies, I could just dodge. The dodge is going to get me out of the situation mildly, but is also going to slow all nearby targets and potentially freeze them. So it's very good for that. I'm a fan. It's definitely placing higher than Shatterdive, and I actually put it in the B tier, and I think it's better than Howl the Storm. Yeah, it's gonna go somewhere around there. But anyways, that's 2 hours and 42 minutes to do all 51 aspects. So yeah, I'm gonna call it there. If you enjoyed, let me know. And like I said, I got some other video ideas that I have planned, so I hope to get started on those at some point. I might take a little bit more time off before I actually get rolling. But yeah, anyways, I'd appreciate it if you like the video. Comment, let me know what you're thinking. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Take care.